The New York City subway, being one of the most expansive subway systems in the world, has many different lines and services that go to many places around the city, and during rush hours, even more are created. In this video, I take all of you through the New York City subway's rush hour service changes. Be sure to like, subscribe, and become a channel member for more content like this in the future. Now, I think that since it was the first part of the subway system to open back in 1904, it would be appropriate to start with the IRT, or as it's officially referred to, the A Division. Going in numerical order, we'll be starting with the 1 line. First up, we have the line originating at 231st Street during AM and PM rush, and terminating at both the 215th Street and 137th Street stations during the AM rush. I assume this is done to short-turn some trains for more frequent service along the southern portion of the line. While I haven't been on a one train terminating at these stations, I have seen a countdown clock display a train's terminus as 137th Street. I guess it helps to have that mini yard at that station after all. Next up, we have the 2 train to New Lots Avenue. This is done for yard access at Livonia Yard, and I presume to avoid delays due to capacity restrictions at Flatbush Avenue. According to Wikipedia, only one 2 train during the morning rush runs to New Lots, so maybe it's just for extra service along the New Lots line. The same thing happens for both the 4 and 5 trains, however the 5 is a little more interesting. The 2, just like the 5, also starts some services at the Nereid Avenue station. Now, you may not have expected the 3 train to be featured in this video, but hey, the Red Rocket can't be left out. Some southbound AM rush hour trips begin at 145th Street and run to New Lots Avenue. This can be because of one of 2 reasons. The first being the limited turning capacity at 148th Street, and the second being that the Lenox Yard tracks connect to the line south of the 148th Street station, so it would make more sense to just put trains into service at 145th Street rather than have trains run back to 148th. Next up, we have the 4 train to New Lots Avenue, just like the 2, which I previously mentioned. The 4 might be the most consistent line besides the 3 to run to New Lots Avenue, being that it runs there both during the morning and evening rush, along with late nights since 3 train service is cut back to Times Square. I assume it's extended to New Lots for the same reason as the 2, for access to Livonia, but also possibly because of the limited turning capacity at Crown Heights. This might also be the reason that 2 southbound AM rush hour trains terminate at Bowling Green. On the northern part of the line, it runs peak direction express service, skipping 138th Street Grand Concourse, which is extremely helpful, especially because trains tend to move slow between 149th Street and 138th Street due to the abundance of timer signals in that area. In addition to this, some northbound trains also terminate at Burnside Avenue and Bedford Park Boulevard, along with PM rush hour trips starting at Bedford Park and Kingsbridge Road. It makes sense that some trains would terminate at Burnside Avenue. This allows for short turns to send trains back down to Manhattan quicker. I'm not completely sure if the 4 runs express in the Bronx to Burnside Avenue, however, some of the people I talked to before creating this video said that it does. Now we move on to the 5 line, which might have the most of the rush hour services on this list. To start off, we have the peak direction express service along White Plains Road between East 180th Street and 3rd Avenue 149th Street. These same express trains run to Nereid Avenue, while 5s going to Dyer run local. The 5 also runs limited evening reverse peak service from Bowling Green to Gun Hill Road, making express stops in the Bronx. And no, I don't only mean from 149th Street to 180th Street. I mean from 149th Street to Gun Hill Road, making only one stop at East 180th along the way. Now we move to Brooklyn for the rest of the changes. During both AM and PM rush, the 5 originates and terminates at Crown Heights, Utica Avenue, and runs up to the Bronx. Some of these trains terminate at East 180th Street, which might actually be what causes the delays there, and the others run to Dyer and Nereid. In addition to this, extremely limited service during the AM rush runs northbound from New Lots to Dyer Avenue. And now we're on to the 6, one of my favorite lines in the system, right behind the 1 and 7. Against popular belief, 6 express service operates outside of rush hours, so we will not be talking about that. The line does, however, have 2 locations where trains short turn during rush hours. These 2 short turning locations have actually made me late a couple of times too. No, I'm not talking about Parkchester, but 2 express stops down, at 3rd Avenue, 138th Street. During the AM rush, some trains terminate and begin service here. Now you may be asking, how does this interfere with express service? And I can tell you firsthand, the delays it causes are horrible. Express trains are forced to slow to a crawl just before 3rd Avenue and sometimes stop in the middle of the tunnel before getting clearance into the station. The trains then have to switch to the local track since short-turning trains occupy the center track. It's a horrible experience and adds too much time to riders' commutes. Now I did mention that there were 2 short-turning locations, and the second one is just 1 stop down at 125th Street. Apparently, one southbound PM rush hour trip begins and ends at this station. Unlike the 6 express train, the 7 express train only operates during rush hours. This came as a big surprise to me, as the 7 is one of the most used lines in the system, and it would make sense to run express service all day. Anyways though, this is the only rush hour service change for the 7 and operates from Flushing to 34th Street between 6:21 and 10:29 AM, and to Flushing between 2:46 and 10:12 PM. Actually, did I say that this was the only change? It really isn't. In addition to the express service running only during rush hours, some services originate and terminate at both the Willets Point and 111th Street stations. That just about sums it up for the IRT, so let's move down to the B division. Now for the first line of the B division, the A. We have 1 extension along with 2 short turning sites. These 2 stations are Dyckman Street and 168th Street. Again, this is probably due to the limited capacity at Inwood and for yard access at the 207th Street yard, which is accessed easily from the center 2 tracks at Dyckman Street. The aforementioned extension I was referring to is the Rockaway Beach extension of the line, which runs only 10 services a day at an interval of every 20 minutes. This is one of the most underserved train lines in the city. Just to get the few clips of footage you saw in the Beach 105th Street video, it took upwards of 30 minutes. Unacceptable for commuters in the Rockaways, and it really becomes apparent why the 2 least used stations in the system are both in the Rockaways. People just choose the buses over the subway, and it's understandable. This is why we need the Rockaway Beach branch and the H train proposal I talked about in the video in the top right corner of the screen. Moving on to the B line, we have one of the most known rush hour changes in the whole of the system, the rush hour extension to Bedford Park Boulevard. But that isn't all. Some B trains along that rush hour extension actually terminate at the Kingsbridge Road station, and those that do skip 182nd and 183rd Streets. I don't know exactly why they do this, but they do. Now, moving on to the C line. Oh wait, never mind. On to the next line, which is the U. We have only 2 service changes on this line, and that is the origination of some services at Bedford Park Boulevard and peak direction express service between Bedford Park and 145th Street. I only wish this was all day, because having both the B and that one on the concourse line would greatly increase service and fill in some of those gaps you see during off-peak hours, while also allowing for longer periods of peak direction express service. Next up, we have the E line, also known as the Homeless Express. For the E, we have the extension to Jamaica 179th Street via Hillside Express and Hillside Local. Hillside Express sees the E stopping at only Kew Gardens, Parsons Boulevard, and Jamaica 179th Street, while Hillside Local services stop at stations in between. One of those stations is actually the least used station on the E line and appeared in one of my videos, against the wishes of many viewers who felt that it should not have been featured since it only stops there during certain times of the day. Whatever though, the video has already been created. Now we know that the E currently runs to 179th Street due to Jamaica Center not allowing for high turnaround numbers. It can only support 12 trains per hour, so in order to run additional service, you would need to short turn some trains, which would interfere with M and R trains at Forest Hills, or you can add express service to a branch that normally doesn't have it, which in this instance is the 179th Street branch. For the F line, we have Cover Express service between Church Avenue and J Street Metrotech, which runs only 4 services per day, 2 to Queens during the morning and 2 to Brooklyn during evening hours. This is something that I would actually like to see all day long for all F trains, while G trains handle Cover local service. Hear me out. With 8-car trains running with CBTC on Cover and Crosstown, possibly allowing for a train every 5 or so minutes, it can work. Anyways though, that wasn't all for the rush hour changes. Some trains begin and end their trips at Church Avenue with the G train, and some northbound AM rush trips begin at the Avenue X station. The J and Z trains, involved in one of the most useless skip-stop services I have ever seen. Obviously run skip-stop services. They both run peak direction express service between Myrtle Avenue and Marcy Avenue, and some rush hour trips begin and terminate at the Broadway Junction station. Moving on to another BMT Eastern line, we have the L. This one actually surprised me as I wasn't expecting much of a change from the 8th Avenue to Canarsie routing of the line, but apparently during rush hours there are 2 changes to service. First off, some trains coming from Canarsie Yard begin service at East 105th Street, running towards Manhattan. The second is that some Brooklyn-bound trains short turn at the Myrtle Wyckoff Avenue station and run back to Manhattan. The Mystic train doesn't actually have any rush hour service changes, but I thought I'd mention that the line only runs to Forest Hills between about 6:30 AM and 10 PM, and it's cut back to Delancey until about 11:30 PM, when it's cut back even further into a shuttle service between Metropolitan Avenue and Myrtle Avenue. Nancy, as some of the operators call it, has 3 service changes. The first being that some services originate and terminate at Gravesend 86th Street in Brooklyn, like another line I'll be talking about in a few minutes. The second being that one N train during the morning rush makes local stops in Brooklyn, stopping at DeKalb Avenue, along with the other 4th Avenue local stations. These trains to 2nd Avenue are scheduled as N trains, but signed as Q trains. I actually mentioned in one of my de-interlining videos the proposal to send the N train to 96th Street at all times, the R to Astoria, and to eliminate the W, but it was met with mixed reactions, to say the least. Moving on to the queen of the system, also the queen of the long headways, the Q. We have only one service change here, and that is that it runs along the N line to... wait, this is literally just the N to 96th Street that I was just talking about. Well, I guess a notable mention is the R160Q train, that's technically an R, but whatever. The R line, also known as the line that never comes, has 3 service changes, similar to the N. Some rush hour trips begin their runs at the 59th Street and 36th Street stations. After talking to some people, I found out this is because trains deadhead from Coney Island Yard and start their services as soon as they reach 4th Avenue. The third and final service change for the R is that one train runs to 2nd Avenue during the AM rush and comes back downtown signed as a Q train. And for the last subway line, the W. It sure as hell doesn't score any W's though, with it being a support line to both the N and R. The line has only 2 service changes. One which is an extension to the line, with it running down to Gravesend 86th Street on the Sea Beach line, and another in which northbound service begins at Canal Street. Fun fact, these trains are stored on the lower level of the City Hall station, which is not used in revenue service. Now that we're done with the service changes for the subway, let's move to its sister service, the Staten Island Railway. This line, despite its low ridership, actually has some rush hour services. Rush hour express services skip all stations between New Dorp and St. George in the mornings, and all stations between St. George and Great Kills during the evenings. In addition to this, some trains terminate at the Great Kills and... what's that word? Huguenot? Yeah, let's go with that. As you can see, the New York City subway system has many different services that only come out during rush hour, and it provides a lot of new destinations for passengers, along with easier one-seat rides. I think the 2 most useful ones on this list are the B to Bedford Park, and despite some of the delays it causes at East 180th Street, the 5 to Nereid Avenue. Anyways though, that's the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, like it, subscribe if you haven't already, and consider becoming a channel member to further support the channel. I'll catch all of you in the next video. Happy rail fanning, everyone.